Monitoring progress is also something that teachers naturally do. Progress monitoring will focus on specific needs, and those are identified through your data.
Welcome to Principal Office Hours, where we swear there's no detention slip waiting for you. Just real talk from real principals who've survived everything from budget apocalypses. In the previous episode, we talked about why MTSS matters, what it is, the kind of things that it can do for what you're already doing for kids, what it does for supporting the students that you have, and how it's a preventative framework that layers on top of the things that you're already doing. Today, we're going to dig into what is MTSS versus RTI versus PBIS, and there's so many different acronyms out there. What's the difference between all of these things? So in our studios today, we have Adriana Guerrero again. She's the Director of Counseling and Social Emotional Learning at San Marcos CISD. Welcome back, Adriana.
Glad to be back.
So tell us a little bit more about what's the difference, MTSS, RTI, PBIS. There's so many different acronyms. Do we need to learn a whole new system? How do they play together?
So starting with MTSS, since that was actually our previous topic, I think it's important to really remember those key principles, right? Intervening early is something we discussed before. Really monitoring that student progress to where it's intentional is important to bridge those gaps and support, right, students that may have differences, really looking at our own practices as well and adjusting. When you think of RTI, that certainly is a different level of support, but it's all within the same umbrella of MTSS. So that would be more of a multi-tiered approach. When you've identified, okay, there are specific needs here that may require targeted support or intensive, and that could be in the area of learning or behavior. And you would really tailor that instruction to where it's high quality instruction. You'd have multiple data points from universal screeners to other formative data or observations collected in the classroom.
In your experience as a teacher, as a school psychologist, like what are some practical examples that you have of running MTSS as an entire umbrella system and then narrowing the focus on some students on RTI?
So I'm going to take on the perspective of a teacher. In the past, our educator hat really just lends itself to saying, okay, we want to do right by the student. We want to do everything that we can. And so it may be, I have this data. You know what? I'm going to try one more time. And so slowing down that process, I think, is really important to really hone in on those student needs so that we're not missing a key component that could potentially be a barrier, right? Maybe it could be we didn't get enough sleep last night, or vision, right? Maybe we don't have glasses. And it's easy to get caught up in trying to find the solution. And so as a teacher, you want to do the right thing, but it is also important to just scale back and depend on your student support team, your MTSS team, your administrators, your peers, your colleagues, all the things, the families, the parents, or students to really engage and dig into the work.
Got it. And so being mindful that sometimes you need additional help outside just your immediate abilities and reaching out, would this be through like a referral process? Like how would this work practically?
Absolutely. So school districts already have PLCs, ongoing meetings for MTSS and RTI. And so that would be a time to bring in the data as an educator and discuss your concerns. It all begins with data, but you can discuss and hypothesize as a team what some of those barriers to that child's learning or progress could look like. So that is a great starting point, really just discussing that and stating your concerns clearly.
Got it. Once you've brought this up, there's this concept of progress monitoring, and there's a difference between progress monitoring and monitoring progress. What is that difference and how does it fit within this framework?
So monitoring progress is also something that teachers naturally do. right? You are up there providing a lesson and you may be really monitoring, moving around the room. You sometimes go towards students for close proximity, et cetera, but you may also be looking at, are they engaged? Are they having difficulties with a certain problem or item? And so that is naturally monitoring progress in itself, right? You're doing the things, but it may not be as formal as progress monitoring. Progress monitoring really will focus on specific needs, and those are identified through your data, right? Having those multi data sets to say, okay, now we know for sure, right? The child is struggling when it comes to reading fluency. And it wasn't really the passage that was difficult. We've tried 3 or 4 different passages and we're still seeing the same results. From that really comes the work where you discuss a goal and you target a specific skill. If it's reading fluency, that could be the skill that you decide to really target or provide intensive support. And you'd monitor that through looking at baseline data. How is that child progressing from day one? And comparing with each intervention and support that you provide.
That's great. And it really sets the stage for us later on in our later episodes where we're going to talk about data and really dive into how do we work with data in this way. When it comes to MTSS, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's really an umbrella approach to providing these preventative supports for children and for students early so that they can improve and they get better outcomes over time. RTI is a specific process that occurs within this framework. And similarly for PBIS, that was a thing as well, and still is a thing in many places. Would you say that's maybe closer to universal type applications within the MTSS framework?
Correct. It's also preventative and it highlights again the school climate and culture. We want to welcome our students. We also need to be clear with the expectations so that they can also feel successful, and being explicit about those things through positive reinforcement, PBIS events, all of the things, right? I think that is always where you start in order to really understand what the child or student may need.
Got it. So MTSS, if I put it in the context of, say, a middle school, you're looking at the needs of all of your students, whether they're high achieving, whether they're struggling with certain areas, whether they've got discipline issues. They all fall within MTSS because we're collecting data, we're analyzing that data, and we're applying the necessary interventions for each of these students in a very personalized way. RTI then looks at, okay, we have a subset of these students that are struggling with very specific things, and we're deliberately intervening and watching the response to those interventions. PBIS comes when we have, say, a discipline issue. A student has been rude in class or they're bullying someone else. The PBIS is the approach to how we would handle that and to provide positive reinforcements for students that are not displaying those behaviors and addressing the behavior in a positive way with certain interventions. And that could also overlap with RTI. Would that be broadly how I would see it?
It absolutely does. You are essentially creating the best environment to cultivate learning and success and reinforcing those positive behaviors in a preventative fashion versus we're going to only address you when there's a consequence that needs to be applied, right? Or any other difficulties that you may encounter in school. And so it's also very much based practices, just like RTI is.
That's perfect. And as we're talking about this, it feels so overwhelming. I might have 1,000 students in my middle school. How do I personalize the approach to all of these? And this is where we have the concept of tiers. And we're going to discuss that in the very next episode. So all of you listening, hang in there. We're going to touch on how we funnel our activities with limited resources in our school building across all of the students and all the needs that they have. So stay tuned. We're going to touch on that in the next episode. And that's a wrap on today's Principal Office Hours. Before you rush off to put out the next school emergency, take 2 seconds to subscribe. It's way easier than getting your budget approved. And if you like what you heard, head over to principalofficehours.com to sign up for weekly updates on the show. Also, the best compliment would be to tell your friends about us, especially the ones who look like they need therapy or a career change. We're going to be back with fresh principal insights and inspiration every week. Until then, keep being the leader that your ID badge says that you are. See you next time.